The views and opinions of this program are those of the hosts, guests, and callers. There is substantial risk of loss in trading futures and options, which you should carefully consider prior to trading. Well, the active weather pattern is definitely continuing as we close out April and move into the month of May. Severe weather, saw some of that over the weekend, flooding issues, and seeing more potential for severe weather as we start this week. Let's get caught up on all the latest. Joining us now, Eric Snodgrass with Nutrien Ag Solutions for our weekly weather update. And Eric, thanks for being with us again. Hope you had an awesome weekend. I know for some folks, saw some large tornadoes in parts of Nebraska, some flooding issues, and more. It was another active weekend here this past weekend.
Yeah, this deep cutoff low left California after, by the way, putting some rain down in California, some snow in the Sierra Nevada. And normally about right now, they're transitioning into their dry and hot seasons. So it's a little bit late for them. But that low then spun up out of parts of Wyoming. And so it did a couple of things. Down and coming out of New Mexico into western Texas, a huge dust storm. I mean, the size of the dust storm is about the size of my home state of Illinois. Then you go up farther to the north, and we had this pair of supercells that erupted in Nebraska that tossed out some monstrous hail. That was kind of the only big storm, though, overall in the midsection of the country. The southeast had some storms as well, but that same low is now going to be heading off to Iowa, really northeastern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and western Wisconsin. And right now, the Storm Prediction Center's got a mod risk out for that. So that's a 5 out of 6 on their scale. So we need to watch that later today. Then that front sags. It comes right down through the central corn belts all the way down to the mid-south by tomorrow afternoon. And that's where we're going to stretch from maybe like upstate New York all the way to Texas. That whole band has the risk of strong to severe storms tomorrow. So that cuts through Ohio, Indiana, southern Illinois, all the way down to Arkansas, Missouri, everything. So yeah, that's where it's going to set up. But the question is, after this rain comes through, what kind of coverage did we get? And did we fill in the holes that are in Nebraska, in parts of the western Corn Belt? There are still places there that are still quite dry, despite the fact that the southern plains, especially around the Red River, the headwaters of the Red River of the South, I mean, some places down there just in the last weekend alone picked up 5 to 6 inches of rain. So yeah, it continues with the discussion we've had, Jesse, on like when the rainfall is coming, it is so hyper local flooding, and then very nearby areas have missed out on it. So I mean, it's crazy to think that there was a dust storm in New Mexico that blew dust over the top of an area that just had 7 inches of rain this weekend. And that's kind of what's going on in the central United States. And again, it gets guys like me just going, man, this thing it's out of sorts. It's going to extremes very easily. Mm-hmm. We just wonder when it's going to flip-flop back the other direction. And meanwhile, everyone's trying to plant a crop, and they're trying to find these windows to operate in and not worry about what's coming down, longer range. So there we go. It's another day where I could talk for an hour about all of this, but we're going to keep your show here under 10 minutes. So what do you got for me next, Jesse?
I was going to say one quick thing I do want to ask you about, just for folks, when we talk about this severe weather risk that's out there today and for Monday, the very high tornado risk and more, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there can be a little bit of a difference between these isolated supercells versus a line of storms in terms of tornado risk being greater. And we know it could be great in a line of storms, but when you get these individual supercells, those are really concerning, right?
That's right. But the other side of that, Jesse, is that you're going to have people that are in Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, even parts of Illinois, that have been hearing for the last 5 or 6 days, because guys like me have been talking about it, like, hey, severe weather risk on Monday, severe weather risk on Monday. And then what might happen today is those storms, which are isolated rotating supercells, they clobber certain areas and completely miss other spots. And it's an unfortunate side effect of forecasting spring convection, spring weather like this, because you have to tell the whole area, like, hey, you've all got the ingredients, but it's going to be a preferred spot that the storms come through. And that'll be the case by the time we look at this tomorrow. You're going to have folks like, hey, why was I so worried about your moderate risk? I didn't get anything. And it's just a reminder that that's how these hyperlocal storm systems work. But you're 100% right. Now, when we get into June, July, August, then it's the big sweeping squall lines. That's the time period that we get that. And what we're worried about this year is that those ridge running storms may be pretty far to the north and farther to the east, meaning Great Lakes Northeast, not central United States, Midwest Corn Belt. And that's still on the table. So despite all of the rain that's being forecast for the plains, mainly, by the way, that's the southern plains. So parts of Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, which, by the way, I mean, some of the forecast models just in the next 10 to 12 days are going after 5 to 7 more inches of rainfall. Mm-hmm. One model, one of my favorite, the ECMWF, the 15-day total for parts of Oklahoma right now is at a foot of rain. Now, we know not to take that verbatim, like word of truth, that's what's going to happen. But it's just the reality that the plains are going to get soaked. And so, Jesse, if you don't mind, I'm thinking about this in the context of the broader narrative we've had, which is we think there's going to be some summer drought problems, right? And so this morning I was having a conversation with some folks. They're like, hey, where's this drought coming from? And I'm like, well, it's not now. Like you and I have been talking, right? Tight spring windows. We talked about the risk of having, excessive rain, East Corn Belt, maybe at times in the plains. I told folks back in winter, like when you and I were in Nashville together, I'm like, hey, if the storms don't return to the plains, then you're talking about your 1980, your 1983, your 1988, your 2011 style mega droughts. I said, but if they do return, then we push that down the road for that risk later. And so maybe it's just a good time to remind folks that when we think about history and say, well, what does this summer look like? And when I say summer, I'm talking about July and August. I mean, technically most of June is still spring-like, okay? But in July and August, I'm worried about these years. So here they are again, 96, 99, 06, 08, 11 and 12, and 17. Now, out of all those years, only 11 and 12 had below trend yield for the Corn Belt. The rest of them were trend or above. What happened in those other years is there was pockets of drought throughout the Western Corn Belt, but it wasn't enough to take the entire national average down. So what I'm trying to just make a point of this year is that we are looking at a year where I do not expect just ubiquitous, amazing conditions for everybody. I think there's going to be problem areas that are more sizable than in other years. And those are the years that I'm using. And sure enough, the longer range forecast models, either be it this Climate Prediction Center, or if it's the European model or the long range national multi-model ensemble, I don't care. You can go look at all of them. They're all just honing in on some risk of the Western Corn Belt for summer drought. And I put it at 60%. And the thing to remember is that means there's a 40% chance that this could fail. And we can go back over to an active pattern, which, by the way, carries its own stresses. You stay wet throughout the summer, you now are dealing with the potential for yield loss from fungus, from other things, from too many storms, too much water. It messes with the nutrients. And so the reality is, Jesse, sorry if I'm just on a bit of a soapbox here, but the reality of it is this, right? We all know the same old adage because it's said to us at every meeting we go to. There's 600 bushel potential in every bag of corn seed. And we typically get a third of that out of it, okay? What I'm thinking about here is that every single year there's abiotic stress that hits the crop. It's 75% of the yield loss. It can come from a variety of factors. And what I'm trying to make a point of this year is that variability is so high in the precipitation patterns that I just think we've got to be concerned about that come midsummer. And if you combine the deadly combination of heat and drought at the same time, then there's going to be some folks that just take a beating. So there are still signals there despite the wetter conditions that we do see in the plains. So there you go. I'm going to step off my soapbox and come back to reality. But, these are the things we think about. Yeah. And I want to make sure that I'm vocal about it so that it's out there and understood rather than just waiting to hear someone's opinion about it after the fact. Because every meteorologist is a genius when we do hind casting, right? I put my neck out there and saying, hey, this is what I see, and I want you to know about it.
Well, Eric, we appreciate you forecasting instead of hind casting here. Speaking of forecasting, in the short term, how about the temperature outlook? That's something you and I have been touching on here quite frequently as of late. How are things looking as we get into May?
Well, if you saw a 7-day frost map, it doesn't look like anything you wouldn't expect to see. I mean, we've got the frost line way up north. It's in halfway through Wisconsin and most of, northern Michigan, and then it's up in the Dakotas. It's still common for them to have frost, this time of year. I am just curious about like May 3rd, 4th, and 5th, if I'm in the Great Lakes and East. There's another push of colder air coming through there. I don't think it's going to drop a frost into Indiana or Ohio, like based on what I know today. I just don't see it. But I'm not going to ignore the fact that we could have another push of colder air then. I think if we get past that, it's done. I don't think you have to worry about it anymore. It'll just go quick. So the real thing here, Jesse, is when we think about planting in the next 2 to 3 weeks, it's going to be, are we dodging the rain more than are we dodging the cold? And when those windows open up, folks are going to go. In fact, my drive into Champaign this morning from where I live just outside Champaign, I saw 4 planters running. And so they're trying to go today, even ahead of the rain Tuesday, Wednesday here where I live. So yeah, that's what I got for you.
Make sure to subscribe to the Market Talk YouTube channel. You can watch our latest interviews with top market analysts in the country, find bonus content, and much more. It's easy. Just go to youtube.com/@MarketTalkAg and hit the subscribe button. Or you can search for Market Talk Ag on YouTube.